You're probably familiar with the cage scale system. You probably also know something about the key circle. But what you might not know is that when we combine the two, we can create a really powerful system for visualizing the fretboard and eliminating some of those dead zones that can occur when improvising. One of the main things that separates beginner and intermediate guitarists from the pros is familiarity with the fretboard. Now, this is partly to do with the fretboard markers, but also that we always learn scales from bottom to top and vice versa. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this method, as you'll see in this video, but it can make it really difficult to make the leap from our mechanical muscle memory of the scale shape in one position to being able to navigate with freedom all over the fretboard. And this is where we encounter what I like to call fretboard dead zones. Those dead spots where we're fearful of making mistakes, or that there are keys that we avoid playing entirely. So in this video, I'm going to briefly explain what the circle of fourths is and how it can transform your understanding of harmony, songs, and scales. And then I'm going to move on to some concrete scale practice that you can implement straight away. My name's Steve Walsworth. Let's dive in. If you do a basic online search of key circle, you'll be presented by a multitude of diagrams that are all called the circle or cycle of fifths. And this tends to be the preferred method of working out key signatures. So we start with our neutral key of C, go up a fifth to the key of G major, add a sharp, go up another fifth to D, add another sharp, and so on. But there's a strong argument that its primary purpose is to visualize this as a circle of fourths. So either going counterclockwise or simply flipping it around the other way. And for me, this is the real key to unlocking the fretboard. Now, you might have heard players such as Matteo Mancuso, Frank Vignola, Oz Noy, and others talking about practicing using the circle of fourths. And this is for good reason. One, the guitar is largely tuned in fourths, but more importantly, there are so many pop and jazz songs which move in cycles of fourths rather than fifths. Our classic 2-5-1, for example, is a movement of fourths. And this obviously appears in like a gazillion jazz standards. So if we start from our neutral parent key of C, it goes like so. C major, up a fourth to F, up a fourth to B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat or F sharp, B, E, A, D, G, and finally back to the start again with C. I think the main secret to visualizing the scales that we'll be using is quickly finding our octaves. Once we've got those pinned down, then we can start to populate the notes in and around them. For example, if we wanted to play C major in fifth position, I know that we've got a C here, here, and here. Now in my mind, this immediately makes a link to both the caged C chord and its accompanying major scale. Now, of course, there are many different ways to play a major scale, but in my experience, we can largely distill this down to our 5 cage shapes, plus an extra 2, which help minimize any clunky hand movements across the fretboard. A good place to start is with ascending 1-octave patterns, because this can really help to bed in the sound of each tonal center as we travel through all 12 keys. But rather than travel horizontally up and down the same string, we're going to try and minimize this sideways movement across the fretboard. So if we start our C major scale in fifth position as before, when we move to the key of F, we're looking for our nearest F octave. This should lead to this scale shape. Then we move to B flat and we look for our nearest B flat octaves. We've got one here and here. Now you've got a choice. You can either play the low octave or the high octave, and so on until we travel through all 12 keys. But the real challenge here is staying within the same area of the fretboard. So the next step is to take a different starting scale position and go from there, as it's going to throw up a different set of scale shapes. Let's take our E shape C scale and go from there. I'm going to take this one a little bit quicker. This is such a great practice is because it gets us really thinking about where we're moving next, rather than simply playing the same pattern up and down the fretboard chromatically. It's really easy to fall into the trap of regurgitating a pattern, and this is where our mind can start to wander away from real musical intention. So our ultimate aim is to travel seamlessly through all 12 keys. But you can tailor this to your own practice routine or level. For example, you can start from anywhere within the circle, or you can focus on a small area to start with. So far, we've looked at all of our scales ascending from the root note, and this is a great place to start, but unfortunately, music and melody doesn't work like this. If we want to develop a true sense of fluidity and freedom all over the fretboard, we have to be able to identify notes above and below the octave, but more importantly, develop this idea of playing a scale starting from any note from within the scale, not just the root note. So the next exercise is based on a strict set of 16 notes over one bar, either ascending or descending. And wherever we are in the scale, we then flip to our new key center and then try and find our relevant scale shape. So for example, if we take our 2-octave C major scale like so, our last note is that D here. We then move to the next key in the circle, which is F major. We look for our F octaves, and that should lead to this descending pattern here. You should be able to hear the new tonality. Likewise, when we flip to B flat, we're looking for our B flats. This should lead to this scale shape. Now be warned, this is a real challenge because it's much harder to visualize the scale shapes because we're frequently starting on a note other than the root. So this is where it's really useful to visualize those octaves. Over time, your brain will start to populate those notes in and around them. As with the first exercise, you can shift the first scale into a new position and this will throw up a brand new challenge. For me, a nice way of thinking about this is as a game rather than a stale set of scale exercises. There are so many different permutations. We could even play licks in fourths, or we could play our pentatonic scales. But I'm going to leave you with a pro level challenge, which is based off an idea that I saw the great Carl Verheyen do many years ago. The principle is that we'll rattle through our 16 notes in one position and then shift to a new position for our new key in the circle. For example, we could start with C major here. Then we'll move to F, but instead of staying in the same position, we'll shift to a new position, downwards. B flat. E flat. You could even do the ascending pattern. This one starts with G major all the way up here in 14th position, and we're going to gradually work our way all the way down the fretboard and then all the way back up again.